Hello! Welcome to my item inventory video. This is a super flexible and really dynamic system that will work for literally any kind of game, and it even works for stuff that aren't traditional items. This covers how to create new items that each contain a bunch of different data that you can use for different stuff, like their name, description, any sprites that need to go with them, whether or not they're a key item, like you can drop them, even contains their effects super easily. Then I cover how to add those items to an inventory, remove the items and drop them, swap them out with other items, making sure you can't pick up items whenever your inventory is maxed out, and using super different types of items. I cover like a healing item, 2 different ways to do a type of key item, a weapon item like a bomb, and once you get through this whole video, you'll be able to do pretty much anything, any kind of item. This can be tacked on super easily to my RPG series, and if you don't know much about for loops and arrays, then you can definitely check out the menu system video that I've done. That would go really well with this one if you're not super confident with those concepts. You can see the video is a little bit long. It's just because I didn't really feel like breaking this one up into multi-parts. But mostly it's just because I like to explain things and make sure that hopefully you're really understanding a new type of concept. So anyways, either way, at the bottom of the video, on the little timeline down there, I'm going to kind of insert where the chapters would be, and that way you'll know where we are in the video. And if you want to come back to it, you'll know exactly where you are. And before I go any further, I'd just like to say that I have a game coming out very soon called Starcross Starcade Special. You can wishlist it right now on Steam. If this item system helps you out, then that would help me out a bunch. And there's a good chance that by the time you even watch this video, it will actually just be released. So if you wanted to buy it, that could really help me out. That and the internet stuff, you know, the liking, the subscribing, the Twitter following, you know, if you wanted to do that. But anyways, I'll shut up and I'll just get to it. Good luck! Before we get started, I'm just going to show you a short little demo of what everything actually does right now. And this will be like a good look into how easy it is to get this system to do like a lot of different stuff, and this honestly is not even like the tip of the iceberg. You can do a lot with this. So first we have the items in the overworld that we can actually pick up. And so I just picked up the red key. This is obviously a super temporary looking inventory. The visual stuff requires a little bit more flair and tweaking and work, and is going to be different for all of your different projects, so I'm just doing it this way for the video, and I'm using like mouse clicks and stuff like that for the video. But I'll mention some ways that you can do it with like controllers or buttons or cursors, and at the end of the video I'll give you some more ideas and stuff like that. So anyways, we picked up an item, we picked up a red key. If we hover over it, it shows that it's selected, and it shows a short little description that we wrote, and it says it's a single use, so whenever we left click items, we're going to use them. It's to open doors, so this type item, if I were to try and use it right now, it doesn't do anything until I actually get to the red doors, and then I use it, and it opens the doors. We get a blue key, and a blue key is slightly different because it doesn't go away whenever we open our blue doors. So just open these, and we'll open these. We still have our blue key, so then we can pick up another red key to open that door over there, and we have some food items and a bomb, and we got a lot of stuff here. So another thing that I've done is added a maximum to the inventory. So I've made that 6 be the maximum that we can have here. And so if we have the maximum, we won't pick up more items. Then we can scroll down and see what each one does. So we have like a burger that will increase the player's HP, which I have the top right of the screen. So if I use it, the burger goes away, HP goes up from 10 to 20. We have another food item, which is like a 2-pack item. So if we click it once, it will heal us a little bit, and then it will become half of the pack. The description changes and everything. Basically, this is just swapping to a completely different item, so one thing you'll be able to do is use items and then swap them out with other ones. So we'll use that again. Now that we don't have 6 anymore, we can pick these up. We got a bomb, which would be like an action item, so it would like make a bomb. It doesn't actually do anything. It looks like it's gonna blow up. It's not. I was too lazy to do that for these demonstrations, but you get the point. And then the last thing is, keys are pretty important items, and in a lot of games and RPGs, you have items that you don't want the player to be able to drop voluntarily. I mean, maybe you do. Maybe your game's a little bit harsher than others. But I have it set to where non-important items can get dropped. So if I right-click a burger, we drop it. It's out of the inventory. Same with the bomb. Same with the other burger. But if we try that with the red and blue keys, we can't drop those. So we've gotten all of our spoils and all that, and now you can just leave the level. You've earned yourself 1 entire blue key. And you can do tons of stuff with the system, and it can be super applicable to other things like having separate inventories. So like an inventory that you carry and one that you maybe store stuff in. This would be super, super easy to apply a system like that to this. Okay, so now we can actually get started. I'm gonna open up a new project here. Okay, so I'm here in a new project. The only thing that I've added in is just a player and a wall for them to run into. And then I've added that blue door and red door back in. They're literally just walls. They have no code. They're just children of this thing. And once I bring them back up, I'll show everything. So yeah, that's about it. I assume if you're watching an inventory video, then that means you probably already have some kind of game at least functioning. And if not, I have a whole little series about doing that kind of thing that I probably mentioned in the intro. So now that we're all square, the only other thing that I have is a room where I just drop some walls in to look like that little demo that I showed you, and I put my player in. That's it. No inventory code yet at all. So this whole folder is just my stuff. You can just pretty much ignore it. So first thing first, let's make our object for the item inventory, and we're going to call it object item manager, because this will be managing our inventory and also where we're creating our items and stuff like that. This is going to be an object that you're going to want to reference throughout the rest of your game. It's going to be a very important object, so we're going to make it persistent. And something I kind of mentioned in another video was the concept of maybe creating like some kind of initialization room for a game to put objects like this at the very beginning, so that way you don't accidentally make duplicates, which could cause a lot of problems. So let's just make a new room, create room, and I'll say room init for initialization. I'm going to put this in my room folder first. Then I'm going to go ahead and put it from the quick access to the room order up here. I'm going to go ahead and put this on top so it has the little home icon. And that means that this is the room that the game will start with, which is what we want. And first things first, you might want to just go ahead and set all of your camera settings in this room, because default in GameMaker, the first room that runs sort of dictates like your camera size and your viewports and all of that stuff. Again, you probably already know how to do that, so I'm just going to do that really quick for mine. And once you have that information in, we want to go into the creation code of our room down here on the bottom left in the properties panel. Open up your creation code and just call the function room go to next. This will immediately just take us to whichever room is next in our room order. So again, it's just like we're adding our own little single frame initializer at the very beginning of the game. So we can put any of those persistent instances like our item manager in this room, just anywhere. It doesn't matter how big the room is, because now the game runs for a single frame. It creates this object. We move on to our actual first level or first room or whatever, and now we have this in the game. Like I said, the main reason for this is so we don't accidentally create more than one. And now that we've done that little bit of setup, we can actually start doing some stuff in it. So let's add a create event. First thing I'm going to do personally is just set the depth to a really low number, because I am going to be drawing with this object. Again, this will ultimately vary on what your project looks like. Okay, so now we're going to start creating our items. That's the first thing we want to do. So let's say create the items, and we're going to be using something called structs. Now, a good way to think about structs, if you don't know what they are, is structs are a lot like objects. They're like objects in the way that structs contain their own variables, and those variables can be manipulated and changed with outside sources and within itself, just exactly the same way that objects can. What's really useful about them is they're not nearly as complex or taxing as objects, because objects have a lot of different things attached to them. Objects have different events. They have different built-in data already that they're always keeping, that they're always using in some way. Objects can use draw events to draw things, but fundamentally, the way they work is they work on setting and manipulating their own variables, and that's the same way structs work. So I'll show you exactly what I mean, and as we go on, you'll understand why they're a little bit more appropriate in this situation and how useful they can be. So let's create our first item, and I'm going to create that burger item. So we're going to create and store a struct, and we're going to call it burger. And here's how you create a struct. You would say burger equals, and then you use curly brackets. And now within here, we can start setting our own variables for burger. So I'm just going to indent and space all this stuff out so it's a little bit easier to use. So probably the first two things that we want to look at for an item would be, we want our item to have a name. We probably want it to have like a description, and then we probably want to get a sprite for it, which we'll have to make a sprite. So for now, let's just do our name and description. And here's how you set that stuff in a struct. So let's call this name. I'm going to say name, colon, and then whatever value we want. And we're going to want a string. So we'll call it burger. And it doesn't have to be burger, of course. It can be like, I don't know, mega burger. I don't know, it could be anything. And you can change it later if you want. Let's just keep calling it burger. So now we've already set one variable for burger. So name is not a variable for object item manager. It is specifically for the struct of burger, which we have stored in object item manager. So yeah, just remember everything in here belongs to burger, a word that is both starting to look and sound very strange to me at this point. Okay, so let's move on. Now we want to set our description. And to separate new variables in scripts, you use a comma. So in this instance, I'm going to comma, space, create a new variable for burger called description. And I'm going to do the same thing. This is also going to be a string because it has to be text. So I'm going to say, it's a burger. That's the description. And then maybe I'll add recovers HP. All right, now I'm going to add my little sprite for my burger because I do want to go ahead and add the sprite in here. Okay, so here I have it. It's a very simple 8x8 sprite of a very low fidelity burger. Like I said, I've kept it 8x8 and I'm keeping the origin at the top left because I'm going to use these to draw as like icons, which you would probably be doing for a lot of inventory systems. If you want to have visuals, you might want to do like an Earthbound or like an Undertale type thing, or I mean lots of RPGs. Don't actually use icons and stuff like that, which is totally fine. Again, this system doesn't really hinge on any of that stuff. I'm just going to kind of show you a bunch of different things you can do with it. So I have burger, and I specifically have made burger in a way where I can draw it in like squares. So I'm going to make all the item sprites 8x8. You can do any size you want, and I'm going to put all of them top left. You can do whatever you want, just as long as you're making them all the same. And so now I have a sprite for burger. Need to make a new variable, so comma. Now, you could either call this sprite or sprite burger, like this, or depending on how many parameters you have, or if it might help you to think of it this way a little bit more, you could even just call this icon. So that way you know it's specifically the sprite that you want to use for displaying an icon. Because we're going to be using some of this data in our item structs to actually display sprites for overworld objects for picking them up too. So if your game was a little bit more complex, higher fidelity than mine is right now, then it could be useful for you to have an icon for menu purposes and then have a sprite for like overworld purposes. Or you could call it sprite and overworld sprite or in-game sprite, whatever, tons of stuff you can do. You get the point by now. So we now have one entirely functioning item, at least theoretically. So let's go to our draw event, and I'm just gonna do a little experiment just to see if everything's going well, and to show you how we're gonna start referencing this stuff. So I'm gonna say draw sprite, and I wanna draw my burger sprite, so I'm gonna say burger dot sprite. Like I said, it's just like referencing a variable in an object, because this variable is within our burger. So that's how you do it. If you're testing this right now, if you're testing it in a different object, like not our item manager, currently you would also need to be able to get our struct of burger, which is located in here. So you could do this, object item manager dot burger. So then we're getting that struct, and then from that struct, we're getting another variable within it. You're not going to need to do this for long, and especially if you're testing it in this, you don't need to do it right now. So just keep that in mind if you are testing it somewhere else. You should probably stick closer to the video if you're maybe testing it somewhere else, but either way, I trust you. So just know that now. So the way the icons are working, I just have them as a single frame, so I'm just going to say subimage 0, and let's just say at 1616, so top left of the screen. So I'm going to go ahead and test that right now. Okay, so it's working for me. If it's not for you, then go ahead and do a quick little run back through the video, skipping through a little bit. The places where it could probably be going wrong right now would be you didn't make it persistent, because remember, we put it in our room initialization. So remember, it has to be persistent. You have to have actually put it in your initialization room, and you need to make sure your initialization room is the first room that runs in the game. Then if that's not it, just check this stuff. But everything's working for me right now. You see, we got it right up there. So now let's test our name and description as well, just really quick. I'm just going to say draw text. This is probably going to look really ugly, by the way, because I haven't set any fonts or anything like that. So draw text, we'll say same X position. We'll go to 32, so it's a little bit lower, so it shows up right under. And then we'll say burger name. Oh, right, and with structs, there are like certain variables and constants and stuff like that that are kind of already built in, or they're things that you can't use. Name is not one of them. I'm going to be completely honest with you. I don't know why it highlights red like a constant or something like that. The first time I noticed it, I thought maybe name was a variable that I shouldn't be using for structs, but it has worked with the system for me, and it hasn't caused any problems, so maybe it's just something that's already built in that you can name yourself, and it just doesn't really make much of a difference whether you try and set it or it's already in there. If the red makes you uncomfortable, you can maybe just call it item name or something like that. I don't know. But anyways, it works like everything else. So I'm going to test that. Okay, so it works, and it is quite ugly because it's the default font, and I'm drawing it in the regular draw event instead of the GUI layer. And I'm going to level with you really quickly. Because I make pixel art games, and I really like pixel accurate, pixel perfect games, I very rarely use the GUI layer. I normally will just use the draw event of different objects at different depths or different layers or something like that. So just for the sake of looking nice, I'm going to add in my own font, which I covered in the menu system video and reference in the text box system video. Like I said in the beginning, if you haven't watched it, especially if you haven't watched the text box system video and you're a little inexperienced, then that will help you out immensely later on in this video. Very simple concepts and stuff, but regardless of how simple a concept is, you have to learn it before you can apply a simple concept. And I don't want the video to confuse you or give you misconceptions about something because maybe you're getting some wires crossed or something like that. So anyways, I'm going to make my own font. You can download your own font and set it any way you like. You can right click and add a font from your system. I think it's any, yeah, I got 8-bit operator here, so yeah, so any font inside of your own system. And then whether you're using the GUI layer or the regular draw events, just play around with the size, whatever. I do like making my own though, and I advocate for people making their own, especially with pixel art. Okay, so I've created my own personal font, and I've stored it in global.font. If you have a font asset, you could just type that in here instead of this whole function. And I used this sprite here, which is just a font that I made, a very simple pixel art font. Again, I covered it in the text box video, and I'm just doing everything exactly the same as I did there. So I've created and stored it. I've added a cleanup event, which is the event that triggers when an object is destroyed, or a room transitions and it's no longer in the room, or at the end of the game. And I'm just deleting it there because fonts take up a little bit of memory, and you want to free that memory back so your computer doesn't slow down and ultimately end up crashing the game and other stuff. So yeah, exactly like I did it in there. And now I've just used draw set font before I started drawing the name. So now whenever I run the game, it looks a little bit nicer. So didn't mean to go off on a tangent. It just ultimately makes my life a little bit easier, and it makes it look a little bit nicer for you. So now you get the point though of how the structs work and how creating items work. So before we get any more complicated with our single item or we start making more, let's do something that I personally think just makes it a little bit easier to reference these. And I think a good way to do that is to create a bigger outer struct for these items and make that a global variable that we can reference like so. First, let's get some space. I'm going to say global item list equals, and like I said, we're going to make this just a big struct that stores all of these other little structs. So to make a struct, you open a new thing of curly brackets around it. I'm going to tab this out, and now we're getting a little error. That's because now the format of this struct is just a little bit off. You see it says we got an equal sign, but we expected to get a colon. And that's because now the relationship between global.itemList and burger is the same as the relationship between burger and the name. So whenever we set name for burger, we had to use a colon, right? So now we're setting burger for item list. So the same way that we would be setting that would be with a colon. And now we're all set. So I'll show you something interesting now. Now if we were to run the game with the exact same draw code that we have, this is going to give us an error. So I'll run it really quick. And what this message is telling us is that the variable burger, item manager.burger, has not been set before trying to read it. So it's trying to figure out what this means. And the reason it can't figure it out, and the reason it has not been set in item manager, is because now burger does not belong to item manager. Burger belongs to no one but item list, but our global.item list. So now you kind of see how they're separate things. We're setting them in this object, but structs exist as their own thing. Like, that's what I mean by they're very similar to objects. So now if we want to reference those, we just need to reference them based on our item list. So we'll say we have our global item lists burgers sprite, and we do that down here too. Hit play, and now we're fine. Now it's working. So cool. Now this means that we can make a bunch of more items, have them stored in our global item list. It's very, very easy for other places in our game to reference this item list. So good. And just like we had to do here whenever we were setting this stuff for this item, we need to separate these with commas. So at the end of my curly brackets here, I'm going to add a comma so I can add a new item. And I'm just going to add one more because I think it will help for demonstration purposes. Don't go adding a bunch of items yet. Trust me, it's going to get very cool and very efficient at some point. But I want to walk you through it step by step so you really know what's going on and you can make your own educated choices in the future. Okay, and I'm just going to space this stuff out a little bit more. So now I made another item called bomb, got its name, got its description. I've got its sprite, which I just added from that other project really quick. Same exact size as the burger, 8x8, origin at the top left. And I've set it up exactly the same way, using the colons and the commas to separate everything. So now that we have two items, I think it's about time we actually made our inventory. So I'm going to go down here and create the inventory. Like everything in programming, you could do this a million ways. You can use data structures, arrays, whatever. I think I'm going to use an array for this because nowadays GameMaker has more functions that actually support arrays and make them a lot easier to use than they were before. So I'm just going to call this array inv, and we're going to use the function array create. This way we can just create an array that is completely empty. And so with this you can choose the size of the array you want to initialize, and whatever the default values are, you can also optionally choose that. It doesn't matter for this. And now we have our inventory. I mean, that's all it is. So let's temporarily just add a burger and a bomb in here. So we can just use array push, which is cool. It just adds a value onto the end of an array. Very easy, very simple. We're going to push this value onto our inventory, and the value we want to add would be global.itemList. And for our first one, we'll just add our burger. Now that's cool. And we can just do that again, and this time add a bomb or add another burger or whatever. Array push is actually nice because you could just keep adding them for the same thing, but for the sake of visualization, I'm going to do them on separate lines, because a little bit later we'll make a function to help out with this that is really, really nifty. So now our array has these values, and since there's not much else we can do with them, let's just try and draw them out. So I'm going to go back over here, and we're going to be doing a very similar thing, but we're going to be looping through our array. I'm going to put my font at the top here, and then I'm going to set everything else up. Again, if you don't know anything about for loops, menu system video, just watch it. So I'm going to say for var I equals 0. So we're starting at 0. As long as I is less than the length of our inventory, so array length of inv, then we're going to keep adding to I until we've looped through everything. So let's put all this here. Now we're obviously going to need to manipulate our X and Y positions and get the correct values for our sprites and names and stuff like that. So I'm going to create local variables for X's and Y's. So we'll just say they'll both start out at 16. So var XX equals 16, var underscore YY equals 16. And dealing with our sprite first, the sprite that we want to reference is stored in our inventory like this. So remember, we stored global item list .burger.item, whatever it is, into our inventory. So instead of having all that there, we could just say inventory of our loop, so of our I, the sprite for that. So now we're getting the correct sprite, subimage 0 still, and then I'm going to do it like I did in my little demo. So the X's are always going to stay the same, and then I'm going to do our Y value here plus 16 times I. So that way, every time it loops through, it goes down a bit. And I'm actually going to turn that into a regular variable in a second. So for now, we'll just call this underscore separation, like sep. We'll set that also equal to 16, and I'm going to use that here instead. Because in a second, I'm going to make an actual variable in our create event for this, which will help me out with selecting the items later. So if you're following along with me pretty closely, then continue to do so. So we got the right sprite. Now for drawing the text, I actually don't want the text to draw below it. I want the text to draw to the right of it. So we'll say we want it to draw at the same x plus 16. And that one I'm just going to keep as 16. Like I said, all temporary visuals. So that there. And then I'm going to do the same thing I did with the y. So that's going to be yy plus our underscore separation variable times the loop that we're going through. And then same thing is up here. We just need to use the value from our inventory. And cool. Take a look over this really quick. And if we run it, you see it works. I got my burger up there, my bomb. If it's not working for you, just take another little check. Be very thorough with your checks. I know it can be very difficult to find the differences, but that is a skill you have to get better at. And believe me, I know it's awful at first getting used to it, but such is the way of programming. So it looks like we're doing pretty good. I'm going to go ahead and really quick just add my own special variables here at the very bottom and say this is just for drawing and mouse positions. That's why it's actually important that I have these down here, is so I can track it in the step event as well with the same type of loop. So say screen border, which I will use for these because this is just how far it is from the screen. So I want to keep them the same different distance. You could have one for X and Y, it doesn't really matter. And then separation will just be sep. Or, okay, I don't know why I said speed. It's because I was typing while I was thinking. Or said. All right, sep, not speed. Okay, and run it one more time just to make sure everything's cool. And yeah, we're fine. So cool. Now we have a way to make items and a way to store them in our own inventory. Now's going to be where we're going to get a little bit more efficient with it, and we're going to start doing some cooler stuff. So, it is very easy to make our items right now. Like, very, very easy. However, it could be even easier. Now, something that goes along with structs is something called constructors. And you can think of a constructor as like a template for a struct. Or maybe even you can kind of think of it as like a parent object. You know, when you create an object and it has a bunch of variables and it has its step and draw event and all that stuff, and if you make a child of it, naturally that child inherits everything from that parent. So that's kind of what constructors are good for. But like I said, really they're just a good template for making the same types of structs. So something like making an item list, you want them all to have the exact same type of information. There's no reason you wouldn't want an item to have a name or a description or a sprite. Now, I mean, creatively you might, but in that case, then you just wouldn't type a name in. Or you would type some gibberish or question marks, or, you know, if there was a sprite, you would just put in a blank sprite, or you would just say no one and then have the appropriate checks in the appropriate places. The point is, the reason you wouldn't programming-wise want to do that is because it would make it a nightmare, if not impossible, to have a system that could use your items. Every single item would have to have like unique programming, which could just ruin your life. So our next step is to kind of reverse engineer these structs that we've made, and let's make a constructor so we can have a template. So here's how we would do something like that. So I'm going to go above our item list, and I'm going to create our item constructor. And here's how you would do that. So you would use the function keyword. I'm going to call this just create item, close parentheses, because this is going to look like a function. And then we'll end it by saying constructor. And open up our curly brackets really quick. So now we've made a function that's purpose is to create a struct. Create and return a struct. So we can make our arguments up here first, and we can just go ahead and set these in the same way you would with a normal creating your own function, which what it kind of does is it automatically creates these kind of local variables for you. And whenever I make local variables, I normally start with an underscore. That's just what I do. It's what a lot of people do. So we're going to want name, description, and sprite. And like I said, these are just like, essentially, they're just argument variables. They're just so our function knows which values to read where. So their names are not important, just as long as you know what they mean. So like this one can just be underscore name, and then we could add another argument, and I'll just underscore desk and then we can do like an underscore SPR for underscore sprite. You see they filled out here and they turn light yellow. And the reason I didn't type these out all the way is because you can see at the bottom here, whenever I highlight create item, it shows us the arguments that it wants. And so depending on how complicated your items are, how many uses they are, how much information they all have, you'll get a lot of arguments. So I just don't like seeing super long names down there, but make sure that whatever you put up here, you know exactly what it's supposed to be. So the format for our constructor here is more familiar. So we can just say name equals that first argument, so name, and then semicolon. And we could do the same thing for description, say equals underscore disk, and sprite equals underscore SPR. Now these are going to be the actual variables down here. So I type them out fully and I name them something that I know how to reference in situations like this, where I need to reference a structs.sprite or .name or something like that. So now we have this constructor to make our items. And really quick, I'll just show you outside of the item list how that would look normally. So we would want to say like burger, so equals new, then we use our function, create item, and then we fill in that information. So we would get burger, description, this, then that, and so on. And so this is how we would create a struct using a constructor. The format of this is also a little bit flexible, so you could indent between all these like this. This is totally fine too, and you can see how it lines up down here. So to do that inside of another struct, like item list, it'd be the same thing. Since we're storing some information in another struct already, we would need to use this colon, and we don't need to use our curly brackets because we're doing everything inside of this function here. So let me just redo all of that down here. So I'm gonna say burger equals new, create item. I'm gonna go ahead and start spacing them out, which you might want to at this point because it will be really useful later on to have them separated out like they kind of are down here. And anyways, add burger. Need to make sure we add a comma to separate these arguments out. Add our description, and then finally our sprite again. And then last but not least, we need to remember that inside of structs, we have to separate each of their own values with a comma, like down here. We have name separated with a comma from description, separated with a comma, and we have bomb separated by a big comma because it's inside this struct. So remember, don't forget that. So looking at these two, they look pretty much identical, and it may be kind of difficult to judge what the advantage is here because it looks like they're basically doing the same thing. Obviously, the first thing is you don't have to keep retyping these same variables, but the much more important thing is if you have 50, 60 items in your game, every single one of these variables has to match every other item if you want them to work in a larger system. If 59 of the 60 items have a .sprite, then it will work for all of them. But if for some reason something goes wrong with that 60th one, maybe you just mistyped it, which is an easy fix, but if you mistyped it, it will cause an error. Or at worst, there will be times where you decide to add new qualities to your items as a whole, and having constructors set up all of that stuff for you and then give you a list whenever you click on them of everything that you need to have in it is immensely useful. So let's redo our bomb object really quick. So there we have it. I'm going to test it one more time just to make sure everything's drawn all right. And yeah. So before we move on to actually having our items have real effects, I'll really quickly show you how to pick up items in the overworld and create items like that. So first we're going to make our own little function to add an item to the inventory, which will basically do the same thing as here. But if we make it our own function, we can iterate on it a little bit, and that'll be really helpful for us. So let's just get rid of these really quick. And I'm going to come out here and create a little script. And maybe I'll just call this item functions, something like that. Just the script itself, not this. We can go ahead and get rid of this. And we're going to make our own. So we'll say this one will be for picking up items. Ooh. So I'll call this function item pickup. Open up our curly brackets. And the only argument that we need is just going to be the item itself. So it works the same way, like these little local variable type things. And we can essentially use that same code that we used earlier. So we can say array push. Because we want to be able to use this function anywhere, let's go ahead and reference our inventory object. So object item manager inventory is the array that we're trying to add to. And then we just add the item that we've passed through our function. Same thing, very similar. You'll see why isolating this in its own thing will be helpful. And we can go ahead and at least use it with a new object that I'll just call it object item overworld. Or you call it object item in-game. I know overworld is pretty specific to like feeling to top-down stuff, but you know what I mean. So just a default, I'll make it like the burger sprite or something like that. Like I said, you could have your own set of overworld sprites for stuff if you wanted. They don't have to be the same as your icon sprite. But for here, we'll add a variable called item, and I'll make the default here, say global.itemList, itemList dot burger, right? Our default item is our burger because that's what our sprite is. So let's just start from there, and we can now add our step event, and we want, if the player runs into this, the item goes away and it's added to our inventory. So we will say if place meeting xy object player. So if we touch the player, first we want to add the item to the inventory. So we can just say item pickup and pass through our item that we have, and then we can just destroy ourselves. And I'm just now realizing that item pickup probably is not a very good name for this function. Maybe item add or inventory add is better, because there are other circumstances in which you could add items to an inventory, not just picking it up. So yeah, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and change this. I'm going to go ahead and change it to item add. I'm glad I thought of that right now instead of later on. But yeah, so anyways, I'm gonna snap so you're paying attention again. If you drifted off into slumber within the last 8 seconds, then know that item pickup is now item add. Sorry. So, okay. So, I removed from my item manager the stuff down here, so there are no items in the inventory anymore. But I now have this function, item add, and the overworld item here that should help me out with this. So I'm going to place some items around in this room here. Let's put some burgers down. Put like 5 burgers. It's a lot of burgers. So what should happen is we run into them, and yeah, look at that. Added to the top left here, and it vanishes when it's added. And we can just keep adding burgers. Excellent. So now I can step out of here. And now, once again, something that has a billion different ways to do it. I think for efficiency's sake, just having one object that does all of it. A good way to change which item it is in the overworld would be to like set it in the creation event. So basically just put this code in the creation event of whatever instance you wanted. And if you wanted it to be a bomb, change it to bomb. And then in our step event, we can add this code. We can say sprite index equals whatever our items sprite is. And this will automatically change our sprite once the game runs to the correct one to match whatever we put in the create event. So let's say if I want this one to be a bomb, I can just say item equals global dot item list bomb. And if I run the game, that one's a bomb now. And if I gotta touch it, it adds a bomb. Pretty easy, pretty cool. So we can now collect items. We now have an inventory, and we can display that inventory, albeit just the sprite and name, no description or anything else yet. So now the path forks in like 11 different ways. So let's start with the displaying the description. So I'm back in my item manager, and the next thing that I want to do for this specifically is I just want to be able to track whether or not my mouse is hovering over an item, because that's how I'm going to be using my items. And so let's set a default value for selected item. And we're just going to always keep the default value at -1, so meaning nothing is selected. And we can add a step event here, and we can say get selected item. We're just going to be getting where we are in the position of the array and going from there. And easy way to do that is to loop through all of our positions again in the same way that we did in the draw event. So first we want to set our default of selected item to -1. Then we want to check for other stuff. So we can go into this draw event. Let's just take this loop and copy it and paste it right here. Now obviously we're not going to be drawing anything, so get rid of this stuff. So now I'm just going to do X and Y position checks for my mouse position to make sure I'm within certain parameters. And those parameters are based on this stuff. So we want to make sure our mouse X is bigger than this X. So if mouse X is greater than XX, and then we want to make sure the X is less than the right side of our item. So about here is where our XX and XY are. And we want to make sure that the mouse is somewhere, around here. So it needs to be greater than that value, and it needs to be less than the size of our item icon, which for me is just 8. So we need it to be greater than that number, and we want our mouse X to be less than XX plus 8. And same principle with the Y values. Y has to be greater than YY, and Y has to be less than YY plus 8. And now that we're in those parameters, we can set our selected item to I. Oh, and actually, we need to compensate for the separation here as well. So instead of using separation here, I'm just going to add it into our Y value naturally. So then we'll say plus separation times I. And so now we're checking at the right Y positions for everything as well. And I'm going to go back in our draw event, and I'm going to add another parameter here. And this will just give us visual feedback that we're actually selecting an item. So we'll make a local variable for color. We'll set the default to white, separate out where we draw the text in the sprite. And I'm going to say if our selected item is equal to I. So only on the loop that the loop itself matches the selected item will we run this code. And I'm going to set the color to just yellow. So that way we can actually tell that the item we've selected is selected. Then of course we have to actually set our color and then reset our color back to white so it doesn't mess up the rest of the game. So yeah, in this step, we're making sure that we're hovering our mouse over the icon, then we're setting our selected item that way. And then in the draw, we're checking through the loops if it matches up with whatever item we have selected, and then we're just going to change the color of the text itself just to represent that we are actually hovering over it. So grab a couple of these. Okay, there it is. It's turning yellow, so that means we're on our burger and we're on our bomb. Good. Obviously, the main important thing is just getting the selected item itself. It obviously doesn't have to be with mouse positions and stuff. It could very easily be just with some variable that you cycle through with button presses or something like that. But now that we have this, we can do pretty much everything else that we're going to need. Another thing I'm going to do really quick is I'm just going to draw our description text. I'm going to comment these out. This is getting gross. Okay, hopefully this looks a little bit more intelligible, if not only slightly. So now, like I said, down here, I'm going to add our description. I'm going to use draw text extended, so that way the text automatically wraps around. It doesn't just draw in one really long line. I want to draw it at the same X position, I think, as the name, but the Y position, as you saw in the demo, I decided I wanted to draw it at the very bottom of our list, because that's about the easiest place to put it right now, to where it won't overlap with any names we have. So to do that, I'm going to do our separation times the length of our array of inventory, so that way it is drawing under everything else, directly under everything else. Obviously, the string we want is our inventory I.description. The separation is the vertical separation between the lines once it does break, and then W is width, and that's how long in pixels we want to let the lines go before they start indenting, or whatever you want to call it. So I don't know, I'll just say 80. That might be a little small, but that's fine. And then the last thing is we only want to draw the description of our item if it is selected. So we'll do the same check as we did up there. If selected item is equal to our loop. And let's see how that works. Yep, there it is. It works. And you see that it automatically breaks the line up there. Cool. And I actually don't think it looks better added out, so I'll just make it the same X. Okay, yeah, I think maybe that looks a little bit nicer. But anyways, okay, I know it's been a long time coming, but we are finally at actually using items. And I wanted to save it for last. One, because a lot of this stuff was kind of necessary, or would have been a lot more complicated without all the visual feedback that I've added. But the main thing is, it's a really interesting little thing that you can do with structs, and I wanted you to have time to get used to them a little bit. So, for now, let's add a new parameter to our item constructor, and we will call it our effect. Do the same thing down here. Effect equals effect. Now this is really, really cool what we can do with this. We can actually store our own custom function here, which means that we have essentially completely limitless possibilities for whatever the effect is. And this makes triggering it massively easy. So I'm going to add a comma here, and I'm going to add myself a little bit of space for this effect parameter here. So let's make a function. And just to clarify, there are multiple ways to make a function. There is the way that I made this function, which is to say function, and then you type it out this way. The other way to do it in like an object or anywhere else is you could say like my function equals function, and then you would type in the parameters like this. This would be the exact same thing as this. You can do this either way. These both work. The only reason it's giving me an error right now is because it's confused because I put them right next to each other. But so that being said, we can store a function in this way over here. So that's exactly what we're doing for our effect, and we're just going to say function, and we're not going to have any parameters for it. We don't really need to because this function is very specific to this item. So whatever we want it to do, we can just tell it to do that. So for our burger, let's say we want to take our object player, object player's HP, and we'll say add 10 to it. And that's really, really simple, but again, we could just keep doing stuff. And the way I want to do the using items thing is I like to get rid of them in this function. So I would say like get rid of the item. And the way I would do that is array delete. Going to delete it from our inventory. The index that we're using is our selected item because that's the position where our item is. And then we're just going to number as 1. That just means how many from that point on do you want to delete. So you could delete your selected item and then delete the next 3 if you wanted to. But this basically just means we're just removing that one item at that position, which is this burger here. And the reason I delete it in this function instead of say like the moment you click on it is because maybe some items you don't want them to delete. Maybe they're unlimited items. Maybe they swap out other items and stuff. And this just makes a little bit more sense to me, to be completely honest with you. Just know that this is how you would delete it if you wanted to do it on the button click or the button press or whatever. You could totally do it that way. It would make certain items less redundant for sure. You could also make this into its own function like exactly like I did with item add. You could do item remove, but because a lot of the way I have everything set up is by dealing with a number, not necessarily a type of item, I don't see the need to make it any more simple or technically any more complicated than just using array delete and then whatever position you want to delete it from. So anyways, now we have all that done. And so now how do we trigger this effect? Well, that's easy. We can go under wherever we got our selected item. Again, the only important thing about this code is that you got the correct position of it in your inventory. So as long as selected item gets the same information as this up here, then we can use this. So first, let's just check and make sure that something is selected, which means we'll say if selected item is not equal to -1, then we can start running some code. And now let's say use an item. So I'm going to say we're going to use our item on our left mouse button click. So if mouse check button pressed, not just check button. This runs every single frame and will probably cause you some big issues. This checks for 1 single frame. So it only runs the moment you hit the button, and that's what we want. So if mouse check button pressed, MB_left for mouse button left, then we want to perform this function, and we already stored it in our items effect variable, parameter, function, whatever you want to call it. I'm not good at getting certain technical words right, sorry. But basically, we just need to say from our inventory array, selected item, and we're just going to use its effect in the same way that we would call like a function. And it has no arguments, so you just open up the parentheses and do that, and this will use the effect. Now currently we don't have an effect set up for the bomb, but let me just show you the burger. Okay, so I'm going to pick up my burger, and if I click on it, there it goes. And invisibly, the player's health got added back. Let me just add a little indicator up there. Okay, so in the top right, I've added some code that just shows how much HP my player has. Click on it, got 20 now. Excellent. Now we don't currently have an effect set for our bomb yet, so we can add one really quick. And we don't actually have to do anything yet. We can just put an empty function in here. So not actually doing anything yet. It will just run nothing. It won't even delete it because we don't have the deletion code in here. For example, see? So I've added a new object that I'm just calling object bomb weapon. It has no code, but this would be like a Zelda type bomb item or something like that. And then I added a sprite that just flashes a little bit to make it look like it's about to explode, just to show that that's what it would be doing. So for our bomb function, we can say instance create depth. I'm going to say we want to create this at our object players X and our object players Y. Right now depth doesn't really matter. It would, you would just create it wherever you would actually want it to show up. And now I want to create our bomb weapon, and we could take this code right here to get rid of it after it's done. So let's see if that works. Okay, picked up my bomb, and yep, left a bomb that's about to blow up. Now the bomb could be like a permanent item that you had. So like you might want to keep it, so don't get rid of it, but maybe your player object has like a bomb count or something like that, like in a Zelda game. So you would just say like if object player's bomb count is greater than 0, then you could make a bomb, and you would just want to subtract from that bomb count. But I'm just going to set it back to how it was, just because I don't have that variable and I don't feel like doing any of that. Just a single use for me. But now you can see you can just do like so much stuff with it. Here, we'll do a couple more things. I'll show you how to make the red and the blue keys, which is super simple. Okay, so first let's talk about our red key. Named it red key, literally named it red key. Added a description, opens red doors. It's a single use item. I created a red key sprite, a very simple one. And so my function checks for an object called object red door, which all that is, it is just a wall object. It is just the child of a wall object. I have a depth setting code just so it has a little bit of depth to it. So it's honestly more like a big locked block than a door, but it's just a wall. That's all it is. There's no special code in here whatsoever. So for my effect, one, it checks to see if there are any of the red doors in the room. And then if there are, we go into every single one of our red door objects, and we say, if I'm within 20 pixels of the player, then I'll destroy myself. This is a very simple way to make doors open. You'd probably want to be slightly more specific about how you check it, or even slightly weirder, so you could do some weird fun stuff. But anyways, the point is if this object is within 20 pixels of the character, it will destroy itself, which basically opens the door. It's just a very simple lock and key type thing, literally. And then it removes itself from the inventory. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to add a couple of these red walls here, and I'm going to make this item a key. So I'm going to say item equals global dot. I'm going to make this a red key, and then I'm going to copy and paste it again to add one more key, because there's something else I want to show off. And then maybe add some more red walls just to show that they don't all go away. So, testing time. So again, these are just walls. I have very simple collision, so I collide with them. I'm going to pick up my red key. I'm going to stand by these walls and use it. Key goes away, and the walls go away, and we're good. And these walls are still intact because they were farther than 20 pixels away from the player. One thing is that even if this key doesn't open any doors at all, if you use it, it still goes away. I think for most games, you probably wouldn't want that to be the case. Could be an interesting mechanic for sure, but I think generally most games only want to give you a limited amount of keys, so we can add a cool check here. I'm going to open up a local variable. Oops. So I'm going to call it var, and I'm just going to say used, and at default it's going to be false. Then we can come down here to where we destroy this red door. If we're destroying a red door, it means that we have actually used the key, right? So I'm going to give all that a little bit more space. Now I can set this local variable to true. And so now that we've confirmed that we've actually used it, now we can remove it. So we'll say only if our used variable is true do we delete the item. So let's run the game again and check. So if I run over here and try and use the key, it doesn't work. But then once I actually use it, it goes away for both of them. Excellent. And so that might be a type of thing that you want to use for a lot of different items, where you only want to use them situationally, but you also don't want to waste them if they don't work. Especially if your game is very point and clicky, where people are just going to constantly be trying to use items on everything. But, I mean, that could also be pretty good incentive to get people to try and make more educated decisions on where they try and use items. And that's a thought, isn't it? Okay. Well, anyway, I need to think about that more later on my own. But anyways, yeah. And if you just wanted this to be like a keycard type item, then obviously you would just never get rid of it in the first place. Once you got the red key, it always stays in your inventory and you can always use it. And that's exactly how I did the blue key for the intro part. All the same exact code, except I just didn't even use this used variable or any of that and didn't get rid of the item at all. Same exact thing. But when it comes to keycards and stuff like that, something you do not want to happen, again, most likely, is you don't want to be able to drop those items. You don't want to be able to drop key important items. But you probably do want to drop useless items, especially if you have limited inventory space. So let's cover both of those really quick. So first, let's go to dropping our items. So we can just add a new parameter to this constructor. I like to keep the effect at the bottom, at the very back. So we'll just add a new little thing here, new argument, and I'm just going to call it can drop. And so I'm just going to call it the same thing here too, just without the just without the underscore. It might look a little bit weird, so I might add that under there for me. So can underscore drop. And obviously what we would just be doing with this is just setting a variable to say, can we drop this item? Are we allowed to? So for something like a burger, so yeah, sure, we can drop that. So we'll just say true, because that's where it would be. It would be in between our sprite and this now. You can see it down here. You know what? I'm going to add that underscore here as well. I don't like the way that looks. So underscore can underscore drop, underscore can underscore drop. Yeah. And so yeah, we can drop a burger. We'll make sure to add that comma back in. We could also drop, quote unquote, a bomb, so get rid of. Suppose that's true. And for our red key, even if it's a limited item, it's still a key item. It's still important. So kind of no matter how I would handle a key item, I would probably just say, not true. I would probably say false. I would probably say, no, you cannot drop this. So cool. Now we have that variable for each item, and now we can add some really simple code. We already know whether or not we're hovering over it, so let's just make dropping the item the right mouse button. So drop the item. Okay, so checking for a right click of the mouse, and then we're going to do the same thing that we did for these items that we wanted to get rid of. So I'm just going to copy it, go back to our step event, and paste that code there. This is the same thing, but we need to add that one more check. We need to check that can drop variable, because otherwise this will just delete any item, including keys. So let's say, and our selected item, so inventory of selected item dot can drop is equal to true. Now we can drop items, and we will only drop items that we tell the game is okay. So let's run the game. Let's pick up a bunch of stuff. Burger, got rid of it. Didn't use it. HP, top right, still 10. Same with bomb. We didn't drop a bomb. We just straight up dropped the item. Burger, and we can't get rid of the red keys. Perfect. Now let me think. I think a couple more things I want to do is, well, I can just tell you. You saw at the beginning of the video, I had an item that was it was like a sweet bun item, and it was like an item in a little 2-pack of plastic. And if you used it once, it still left half the item. So to do something like that, let's say with our burger, I'm going to make a new item just by copy and pasting. I'm going to call it burger half, and this will be half eaten burger. So this is burger to finish eating. And really quick, I'll just make a new sprite. Just gonna take my burger and just, there you go. Very perfectly half-eaten burger. Set the sprite correctly. This is an item that we can drop, and we'll say it has the same effect. Or now that we're having it, let's say they each only add 10, right? Now this is all good down here. Burger half is done, But now that we've deleted this item, we need to add a half burger item to our inventory. So we could just say array insert. It's going to be our inventory array. We're going to insert it at the selected item position, and the value we're going to add is global dot item list dot burger half. So now once we have this item deleted, then we're going to add the half burger item back in. And we're adding it in the same place that the burger was. We're not just stacking it back on top of the list. This creates the illusion that you've actually just eaten half of the burger, and it's the same burger. So let's try all that out. So I'm going to pick up all these items, weird order. Okay, so burger to eat. Now it's a half-eaten burger. And if you look at our HP, it only added 5. Added another 5. Bomb still goes. You can still drop a regular burger. You can still drop half of a burger. So again, this functionality is very powerful. You can do tons of stuff with it. It's really cool. And one more thing to cover would be having a limit on your item inventory. So let's make a new variable. I'm just going to call it inv max, and we'll just say it's 5. 5 items. It's kind of pathetic item count, but what are you going to do? So we can use this in conjunction with a function that we already made, our item add. We only want to add this item into our array if we have room for it. So we're going to check the length of our array and see if it is lower than our max inventory size. So we'll say if array length of our object item manager inventory is less than our object item manager's inventory max, then we can add the item in. So now we can't have more items than our inventory max as long as we're using this script, which is the way we should be adding items from now on. This is why we made this script instead of just use array push all the time. So let's test that out. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and let's see if we can add the 6th one. We can't. We can't add the 6th one, but it does get rid of the item as if we picked it up. So here's something cool that you can do with functions that is very, very similar to what we did with the red key checking. Let's add a local variable, and I'm going to call it added. And we're going to start it off as being false. We're going to do the same principle where we only change this local variable to true once we've actually successfully added it to our inventory. And then we can use the keyword return and return this variable. Whenever you use return, it sends back whatever value you put after this keyword, and it exits the function after that. So now that we're getting more information from this function, let's go back into our overworld item object in our step event. And instead of just running the function by itself and then just calling the destroy function, we can use this function as an if statement. So we can say if item add is equal to true, then we can destroy ourselves. Even though we've put it in an if statement, this item add still runs all of its code. Even though we're technically, it looks like we're just trying to return value, we're just trying to see if it's true or false, it still has to run all of this code to return that value. It has to run all of this code to get the value that you want to send back at it. So that means anything that you do before you return it still happens, even if you're in an if like this. Even if this is false, it has still run all of this code. So anyways, I'll stop rambling about that. Hopefully it makes sense. Hopefully I didn't just talk for too long again. And now let's see if this does what it's supposed to do. So we can pick up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and we can't pick up this last one because our inventory is full and it doesn't get rid of it. And now I can eat this burger, and now I can pick that one up. So yeah. So as you can hopefully see, there's a lot of room for editing this and adding to it. And it basically just means that at any point, you could add your own functions to it. You could add more parameters. If you have a shop system, you could add a price. Here we go. Price. And so now you would just need to go here for each one, and you could add a money value to each item to determine how much they cost at shops and stuff like that. If your items are in Starcrossed Arcade, which is more like an action game, I use this system for the sub-weapons of the game, and so each one of those has a magic cost alongside of it, like an energy cost. if you start getting complex and you have like different characters and stuff like that, you can have variables for like which characters can use this. There's a lot of stuff to do with it. And obviously there's a lot more room for me to personally iterate on it in another video and stuff like that, which I think I'm going to do. In fact, I mentioned this in the 2,000 subscribers video, which if you didn't see that, or if you're new, which you probably are, yeah, that's pretty crazy to me. That was a big deal for me. And so I just did a little video on that, and I mentioned some of the things that I wanted to try out going forward. You know, first of all, yeah, Starcross Starcade is my main focus for the next few weeks, the next little while here. You can wishlist it on Steam right now. If you really wanted to help me out, that would be awesome. But chances are, by the time you hear this video, it probably might even just be out. So if it is, then definitely go check it out if you want to support me in some way. Once I'm done with that, I'm going to be making videos a lot more regularly once I get back to main big focus on Rosa Starcross, which is just a slower project in general. So I don't feel quite as horribly pressed for time as I do with Starcade, because I want to get Starcade done. But anyways, right after that, one of the things that I'm thinking about doing is maybe little series that are like, you know, how to recreate X game and do like older games, like Nintendo games and stuff. Like how to recreate Zelda 1 or A Link to the Past or something like that. Earthbound is one that I'm really thinking about doing. Castlevania, Super Mario Brothers, all that kind of stuff. And since that stuff would be really, really contextualized, I'd be able to cover some really specific topics that I know for a fact might be more what someone was looking for. Because the problem with making videos right now is sometimes I have to be very vague in the concepts, which is good in terms of creativity and good in terms of wanting people to make their own unique things, which is what I really want. But you have to start from somewhere, and it's easier to see stuff contextualized in the picture of a larger game and how it works. Sure, a lot of you guys are going to be able to actually use this item system in your game, and for a bunch of different types of games too, especially because it's become such an easy thing to make like a good item system now. Like the one in the demo of Rosa Starcross is just horrible. I hate it. I hate the way it works. It was so stressful. And now I cannot wait to go back and uproot all of that and replace it with this stuff. But yeah, there's no doubt that, you know, if you want an Earthbound like item system, then it's important. Then something that's important about that is the way it works in like battles and stuff like that, and how it interlocks with a couple different systems and stuff. Item systems can be a little bit complicated if you think about like Metroid games. You have different types of items, you know, like you have your weapon items, missiles, bombs, whatever, and then you have upgrade items. A lot of Metroidvanias have like overlapping item inventories and stuff like that. Like I said, this kind of system would be really, really easy to create a second inventory. You know, we just created an array called inv, and in your item manager, you could just create another array called like inv stock or inventory stock, or, you know, just whatever, something that represents like an item pool that you're not carrying. And then just make some really simple functions using like the array delete and array insert functions that we talked about. You know, just use a combination of those, delete a certain value from one of the arrays and then just add it to the other one. And then just make sure you're checking proper inventory maximums and stuff like that. But I mean, that's all very adaptable from this system right here. So yeah, but I don't want to leave you too high and dry or anything. This is definitely going to be something that I come back to at some point, but just contextualized a little bit differently. But yeah, hopefully this helped you out. Hopefully this is a good addition to your game, and you're well equipped to actually use it and make your own modifications and stuff to it if you want. Like I said, the best thing you could ever do in the world to help me out, if you wanted to, would be to wishlist Starcross Starcade on Steam, or if it's out, which there's a very good chance it probably will be when you're hearing this. You know, please just go buy that if you want. Definitely subscribing, liking video, hitting the ringing that dang old bell is you know, that does something, I'm sure. I'm not gonna lie, I actually don't know what it does, but I hear other YouTubers say it all the time. So yeah, if you want to do those things, follow me on Twitter, all that stuff. Been very, very busy lately. The main reason I made this one a little bit quicker than I did the other ones, just because it's been a while since I put a video out and I really wanted to have one out. But I'm chest deep in Star-Crossed Arcade work and other things, just a lot of other stuff. Had a little minor back injury type scenario from sitting like a gremlin at my desk all the time. So yeah, very busy and just dealing with a lot of stuff. So answering questions and stuff like that can be very, very difficult for me because it can be super, super time consuming. Hopefully that'll change soon though. What's really cool is there's more people here now, so still ask questions in the comments. One, I might be able to get to them, and two, if I can't, there's other people watching these videos that can hopefully help you out, or maybe someone's even had a fix in the comments for you, you know. Yeah, if you're having problems too, also just always remember to go back and really, really check, make sure your code lines up properly. I know it can be a drag and a pain, but like I said earlier, that's just kind of a skill that you got to get into. So yeah, thank you very much, and hopefully I'll be making a new video very, very soon. Bye-bye.